She cheated while I was sleeping in the next room and left evidence on my phone. The smartwatch that was supposed to track my health ended up tracking the end of my marriage. Hey everyone, before we get in the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. Robert, 32, had always been a creature of routine. As a senior IT specialist at a major tech firm, his life revolved around codes, systems, and the predictable rhythm of night shifts. For 3 years, he had maintained this nocturnal existence, finding comfort in the quiet of the office while the rest of the world slept. His wife, Amanda, had initially struggled with his schedule, but eventually adapted, establishing her own daily rhythm that rarely intersected with his. Their marriage had seemed solid despite the unconventional hours. Amanda worked as a freelance graphic designer, giving her flexibility to manage their home life. They had purchased a modest suburban home 2 years ago, complete with a garden that Amanda tended with passion while Robert slept during the day. To outsiders, they appeared to be the perfect couple, successful, compatible, and deeply in love. Robert had recently upgraded to a high-end smartwatch, primarily to monitor his sleep patterns and health metrics, concerned about the long-term effects of his night shift schedule. The device tracked everything from his heart rate to his movement during sleep, providing detailed reports that helped him optimize his rest. It had become his trusted companion in managing the peculiar demands of his lifestyle. The first anomaly appeared on a Tuesday night. Robert had returned home around 7 a.m., exhausted after troubleshooting a critical server issue throughout his shift. He remembered kissing Amanda goodbye as she left for her morning yoga class, then collapsing into bed. His smartwatch registered his sleep onset at 7:15 a.m., with the expected deep sleep patterns following. What puzzled him was the notification that appeared when he woke up at 3 p.m., unusual activity detected during sleep period. The report showed movement in the house that didn't correlate with his own sleep data. At first, he dismissed it as a glitch. Perhaps Amanda had returned early and moved around the house while he slept. The thought didn't concern him. Why would it? 2 days later, another notification appeared. This time, the smartwatch had recorded significant movement between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., during which Robert's sleep data showed he was in deep sleep. The device's accelerometer had detected motion in the bedroom, footsteps, and even the distinctive pattern of the bed shifting as if someone had sat on it, while Robert remained motionless. Robert's analytical mind began to process these anomalies. He cross-referenced the dates with Amanda's schedule. On both occasions, she had mentioned going to client meetings across town, places that would have taken at least 45 minutes to reach. The timing didn't add up. He began reviewing previous week's data, discovering similar patterns he had previously overlooked. Small inconsistencies in the smartwatch logs that now formed a disturbing picture. Movement detected in their home during hours when Amanda should have been away, sometimes occurring in rooms Robert never entered during his sleep periods. The most alarming discovery came when he examined the previous Friday's data. Between 10 a.m. and noon, while his sleep metrics remained consistent with deep slumber, the smartwatch had recorded movement in their bedroom, followed by elevated heart rate patterns that didn't match his own. The device had even detected the sound of hushed voices through its microphone, though the recordings were too muffled to distinguish words. Robert felt a cold dread creeping up his spine. He trusted Amanda completely, or so he had believed. But the data was undeniable, pointing to a reality he didn't want to acknowledge. As an IT professional, he understood the reliability of these systems. Smartwatches could have glitches, but not consistently and not with such specific patterns. That evening, as Amanda prepared dinner, Robert found himself watching her differently. She seemed the same, warm, loving, and genuinely happy to see him. She asked about his night at work, listened attentively to his complaints about the server issues, and shared stories about her day with her usual enthusiasm. Nothing in her behavior suggested deception. Yet Robert couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. He decided to gather more data before jumping to conclusions. Perhaps there was a logical explanation: Amanda returning home unexpectedly, a friend visiting, some other scenario that made sense. But Deep down, his professional instincts told him that patterns don't lie, and these patterns were pointing toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. As he lay in bed the next morning, trying to sleep after his shift, Robert set his smartwatch to record more detailed logs. He needed evidence, concrete data that would either confirm his fears or put them to rest. What he didn't realize was that the truth he was about to uncover would be far more devastating than he could ever imagine. The following weeks became a meticulous investigation for Robert. As someone who dealt with data integrity and system security professionally, he approached this personal mystery with the same analytical precision. He created spreadsheets documenting every anomaly, cross-referencing them with Amanda's stated schedule, their financial records, and even their home security system logs. What emerged was a pattern of deception that chilled him to the bone. On at least 8 occasions over the past month, Amanda had claimed to be at client meetings or social engagements while smartwatch data indicated activity in their home. The discrepancies weren't minor. They were significant enough to rule out simple errors or forgetfulness. Robert began paying closer attention to Amanda's behavior. He noticed subtle changes in her routine, new passwords on her phone and laptop, more frequent girls' nights out, and a sudden interest in upgrading their home security system, claiming the old one was outdated. She had even suggested Robert disable the smartwatch's home monitoring features, arguing that it was an invasion of privacy and potentially violating their nanny's rights, though they hadn't had a nanny in over a year. The most disturbing discovery came when Robert accessed their cloud storage accounts. As the primary account holder, he could view device access logs. He found that Amanda's phone had been connecting to their home Wi-Fi during times when she claimed to be elsewhere. On several occasions, her phone had been active in their bedroom while Robert was asleep in the guest room. He had started sleeping there occasionally to avoid disturbing Amanda when he came home from night shifts. Robert's heart sank when he examined the data from the previous Tuesday. According to Amanda, she had been attending a day-long workshop in the city. Yet her phone had connected to their home Wi-Fi at 11:30 a.m., remaining active until 2:45 p.m. During this same period, Robert's smartwatch had recorded movement in the master bedroom and elevated heart rate patterns inconsistent with his own sleep data. The physical evidence began to accumulate as well. Robert noticed unfamiliar scents on Amanda's clothes, cologne he didn't wear. He found receipts for expensive restaurants he had never visited, dated for evenings when Amanda had claimed to be working late. Once, he discovered a small earring on the bedroom floor that certainly wasn't Amanda's style. The breaking point came when Robert decided to install hidden cameras in their home. It felt like an extreme invasion of privacy, something he never imagined he would do in his marriage. But the inconsistencies had become too significant to ignore. He needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. The first footage from the cameras confirmed his worst fears. On a Wednesday morning, while Robert slept in the guest room after his night shift, the cameras captured Amanda entering their home with a man Robert didn't recognize. They moved with the familiarity of people who had been together before, comfortable in their shared space as if they belonged there. Robert watched in horror as they made coffee in their kitchen, sat at the dining table where he and Amanda had shared countless meals, and eventually retreated to the master bedroom, the room Robert had deliberately avoided that morning. The timestamp showed 11:15 a.m. According to Amanda's calendar, she should have been at a gallery opening for one of her design clients. The footage continued, showing them emerging from the bedroom nearly 2 hours later, laughing and touching in ways that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Robert felt physically ill as he watched them share a kiss at the front door before Amanda left with him, presumably to continue their day together. What struck Robert most was Amanda's demeanor when she returned home that evening. She was cheerful, affectionate, and seemed completely normal. She asked about Robert's night, massaged his shoulders as he described the server issues he had dealt with, and suggested they order takeout from his favorite restaurant. There was no hint of guilt, no indication that anything was amiss. Robert's analytical mind struggled to process this cognitive dissonance. How could someone live such a double life? How could Amanda maintain this facade of normalcy while betraying him in their own home? The smartwatch data had been the first clue, but the cameras provided irrefutable evidence of Amanda's infidelity. Over the next few days, Robert collected more footage, each instance more painful than the last. He learned that the man's name was Mark, a colleague from one of Amanda's freelance projects. They had apparently been meeting at their house regularly for months, taking advantage of Robert's night shift schedule. Robert felt trapped in a nightmare of his own making. By gathering evidence, he had forced himself to watch the systematic destruction of his marriage in minute detail. Every frame of footage, every data point from his smartwatch, every inconsistency in Amanda's stories painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive it felt surreal. As he sat in his home office, surrounded by screens displaying evidence of Amanda's infidelity, Robert realized he had reached a crossroads. He could continue this surveillance, torturing himself with increasingly detailed proof of his wife's affair, or he could confront her with what he had discovered. The smartwatch that had been meant to protect his health had inadvertently revealed the sickness in his marriage. Now, Robert had to decide how to use this knowledge, and whether his relationship with Amanda could survive the truth it had uncovered. The weight of evidence grew heavier with each passing day. Robert found himself trapped in a paradoxical situation. The more proof he gathered, the more paralyzed he became. The smartwatch data had opened a door to a reality he never expected to face, but now that door was open. He couldn't bring himself to walk through it. Robert's professional life began to suffer. At work, where he had always been focused and efficient, he now found his mind wandering back to the footage on his hidden cameras. He would stare at code on his screen, seeing instead images of Amanda and Mark in their home. His colleagues noticed the change, commenting on his distraction and recommending he take some time off. But how could he? Work had become his only escape from the devastating truth awaiting him at home. The emotional toll manifested physically. Robert developed insomnia despite his exhaustion, finding it impossible to sleep even after grueling night shifts. His smartwatch, once a tool for health monitoring, now recorded erratic sleep patterns, elevated heart rates, and increased stress levels. The device that had revealed Amanda's affair now documented the deterioration of Robert's own well-being. Amanda remained seemingly oblivious to Robert's turmoil. If she noticed his withdrawal, she attributed it to work stress. She became more attentive, bringing him coffee when he worked from home, suggesting weekend getaways to help him relax, and even booking a couple's massage. Each gesture of care felt like another twist of the knife, a reminder of the elaborate deception she was maintaining. What baffled Robert most was Amanda's ability to compartmentalize her life. How could she be so loving and attentive to him while carrying on an affair in their own home? The smartwatch data showed that sometimes she would meet Mark in the morning, then return home and greet Robert with genuine seeming affection as if nothing had happened. This emotional duality was something Robert's logical mind couldn't comprehend. Robert's isolation intensified. He couldn't confide in friends or family without revealing the extent of his surveillance, which made him uncomfortable even as it provided necessary evidence. He felt alone in his knowledge, trapped between the desire to confront Amanda and the fear of what would follow. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One evening, Robert returned home early from his shift to find Amanda in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner. She greeted him with a warm hug, kissing his cheek as she always did. As they stood there, Robert's smartwatch vibrated with a notification. Heart rate variability indicates high stress levels. The irony was almost too much to bear. His body was reacting to the very person who was supposed to be his source of comfort. Amanda noticed his tension. "You seem more stressed than usual," she said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything okay at work?" Robert looked at her, at the genuine worry in her eyes, and felt a wave of something he couldn't identify. Pity, perhaps, or confusion. How could someone lie so convincingly? How could she maintain this facade without any apparent effort? "I'm fine," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just a long night." That night, Robert made a decision. He couldn't continue living in this limbo of knowledge without action. The smartwatch had done its job, revealing the truth he might never have discovered otherwise. Now it was time for him to do his. He began documenting everything systematically. He downloaded all the smartwatch data, organized the camera footage by date, and created a timeline of Amanda's affair. He wanted to be prepared when he confronted her, armed not just with emotion, but with irrefutable evidence. As he worked, Robert reflected on how technology had both destroyed and preserved his marriage. The smartwatch had uncovered Amanda's betrayal, but had also recorded their life together, their shared moments, their travels, even the nights when Robert's heart rate would increase simply from Amanda's touch as they slept. These records now served as a painful reminder of what had been lost. Robert also considered the ethical implications of his actions. He had invaded Amanda's privacy, recorded her without consent, and compiled evidence against her. But he justified his actions as a response to her deception. She had violated their marital trust first. He had merely documented the consequences. The decision to confront Amanda brought a strange sense of relief. The constant anxiety of the past weeks had given way to a clear purpose. Robert knew the conversation would be devastating, that would likely end their marriage. But he also knew that living with uncertainty was worse than facing the truth, no matter how painful. As the sun rose on another day, Robert prepared for what would come. He organized his evidence, rehearsed what he would say, and steeled himself for the emotional fallout. The smartwatch that had started this journey would now bear witness to its conclusion, recording the physiological responses of a man about to confront the deepest betrayal of his life. The confrontation happened on a Sunday morning, a day that had always been reserved for leisure and connection in their marriage. Robert had slept poorly, his smartwatch recording fragmented sleep patterns and elevated heart rates throughout the night. He woke before Amanda, reviewing the evidence one final time before the conversation that would change everything. When Amanda entered the kitchen, she found Robert sitting at the table, a tablet in front of him. She smiled her usual morning greeting, moving to kiss his cheek before noticing the tension in his posture. "Morning," she said, her cheerfulness slightly muted. "You're up early. Trouble sleeping?" Robert didn't respond immediately. Instead, he swiped through the tablet, organizing the files he had prepared. Amanda's smile faded as she sensed something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, her concern genuine. Robert looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I need to ask you something," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "Where were you last Tuesday between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m.? Amanda blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Tuesday? I had that workshop downtown, remember? The one for new design software." Robert nodded slowly, then turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a still image from their home security camera, showing Amanda entering their house at 11:17 a.m. that Tuesday, accompanied by a man Robert now knew was Mark. The color drained from Amanda's face. She stared at the image, then at Robert, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. For the first time since this ordeal began, Robert saw a crack in her carefully constructed facade. She began, then stopped, clearly searching for words. "It's not what it looks like." Robert swiped to the next image, Amanda and Mark kissing in their kitchen. Then another, them entering the master bedroom. With each image, Amanda's composure deteriorated further. "How long?" Robert asked, his voice betraying none of the emotional storm raging within him. "How long has this been going on?" Amanda collapsed into the chair opposite him, tears now streaming down her face. 6 months, she whispered, not meeting his eyes. "It started about 6 months ago." Robert nodded, though the confirmation still felt like a physical blow. His smartwatch vibrated on his wrist, alerting him to his spiking heart rate, a technological reminder of his very human pain. "Was it happening here?" he asked. "In our home." Amanda nodded miserably. "Mostly when you were working nights." "I never meant for it to happen, Robert. It just did." The conversation that followed was a painful unraveling of their marriage. Amanda confessed everything. How she had met Mark through a freelance project, how their professional relationship had developed into something more, how the convenience of Robert's night schedule had made their home the perfect meeting place. What struck Robert most was Amanda's explanation of her feelings. She claimed she still loved Robert, that the affair had nothing to do with their relationship itself. She described feeling lonely with Robert's nocturnal schedule, isolated in their home while he worked through the night. Mark had provided companionship during hours when Robert was unavailable. "I never wanted to hurt you," she insisted, reaching for his hand across the table. "I was going to end it. I swear." Robert withdrew his hand, standing up and walking to the window. Outside, their garden bloomed with the care Amanda had lavished on it. A beautiful facade hiding decay, much like their marriage. "Did you ever consider talking to me?" he asked, his back to her. "Telling me you were lonely? We could have found a solution." "I was afraid," she admitted, her voice choked with emotion. "Afraid of what you'd think, afraid of losing you. I convinced myself that as long as you didn't know, it wasn't really hurting anyone." Robert turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "That's where you were wrong. It was hurting me every day, even when I didn't know it. It was eroding everything we built together." The smartwatch on Robert's wrist continued its silent monitoring, recording the physiological manifestations of his heartbreak: elevated cortisol levels, irregular heart rhythms, heightened stress responses. The device had become an unwitting participant in their marital drama, a digital witness to the emotional devastation. As the conversation progressed, Robert's initial shock gave way to a strange clarity. The confusion and uncertainty of the past weeks had been replaced by the painful but undeniable truth. He now understood Amanda's changed behavior, her unexplained absences, her sudden interest in privacy. Every piece fell into place, forming a complete picture of betrayal. The most difficult moment came when Amanda asked what would happen next. Her tear-streaked face looked up at him, a mixture of fear and hope in her expression. Fear of losing him, hope perhaps that he might forgive her. Robert looked down at his smartwatch, at the data it had collected, at the evidence of his deteriorating health over the past weeks. He thought about the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the constant stress of living with suspicion. He considered the trust that had been broken so completely, the foundation of their marriage shattered beyond repair. "I need some time," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I need to figure out what comes next." Amanda nodded, understanding perhaps that this was as much of an answer as she would get for now. As she left the room, Robert remained at the table, surrounded by the evidence of a marriage in its final moments. The smartwatch continued its silent monitoring, recording the aftermath of a revelation that had changed everything. The days following the confrontation were a blur of painful realizations and difficult decisions. Robert found himself moving through a strange liminal space, no longer living in ignorance, but not yet ready to embrace the future that awaited him. His smartwatch continued its silent monitoring, recording the physiological manifestations of his emotional turmoil. Robert had moved into the guest room immediately after the confrontation, creating a physical boundary that mirrored the emotional chasm that had opened between them. The first night apart was agonizing. His smartwatch recorded nearly zero sleep, his heart rate remaining elevated throughout the night as he replayed their conversation in his mind. Amanda's behavior vacillated between remorse and self-pity. She left handwritten notes apologizing, prepared his favorite meals, and attempted to engage him in conversations about their history together. But Robert remained distant, responding minimally when necessary, but otherwise maintaining a protective silence around himself. The smartwatch data from this period told a story of profound stress. Robert's sleep patterns were erratic, his resting heart rate remained elevated, and his stress indicators consistently registered in the high-risk zone. The device meant to protect his health was now documenting the toll of emotional betrayal on his physical well-being. A week after the confrontation, Amanda suggested marriage counseling. She presented it as a path to healing, a way to work through their issues, and potentially rebuild their relationship. Robert listened without expression, then agreed to attend a single session, not with the hope of reconciliation, but with the need to understand how everything had fallen apart so completely. The counseling session was excruciating. With the therapist's guidance, they explored the timeline of the affair, the factors that had contributed to it, and the impact it had on both of them. Amanda spoke of her loneliness with Robert's night schedule, her feeling of disconnection from his life, and how Mark had initially provided emotional support before becoming something more. Robert found it difficult to articulate his feelings. How could he explain the depth of his betrayal? The way Amanda had violated not just their marital vows, but their shared home, their bed, their life together. He spoke of the smartwatch data, of how technology had revealed what he might never have discovered otherwise, of the pain of watching evidence of her affair accumulate day by day. The therapist asked whether Robert saw a path forward, whether he could imagine forgiving Amanda and rebuilding their marriage. Robert looked at his wife, this woman he had loved, built a life with, trusted completely, and felt nothing but a hollow ache where his heart used to be. I don't know, he admitted honestly. Every time I close my eyes, I see the evidence. I see the smartwatch notifications, the camera footage, the proof of what happened in our home while I slept in the next room. How do you move past that? The session ended without resolution, but with a clearer understanding of the road ahead. Robert knew then that forgiveness wasn't possible. Not because he didn't want to, but because the betrayal had fundamentally altered his perception of Amanda and their relationship together. The decision to separate came gradually, then suddenly all at once. Robert had been researching his options, consulting with a lawyer about the implications of divorce. The smartwatch continued its documentation, recording his sleepless nights, his anxiety spikes, and the gradual stabilization of his stress levels as he moved toward a decision. When he finally told Amanda he wanted a divorce, her reaction was a mixture of devastation and resignation. Perhaps she had seen it coming, had recognized the irreparable damage her actions had caused. They agreed to proceed amicably, to divide their assets fairly and avoid unnecessary conflict. The practicalities of separation began immediately. Robert started looking for an apartment, a place to rebuild his life away from the home that had become a symbol of betrayal. Amanda made arrangements to stay with family, giving them both space to process the end of their marriage. As Robert packed his belongings, he found himself revisiting memories triggered by ordinary objects. The coffee mug they had bought on their first vacation, the framed photo from their wedding day, the smartwatch he had purchased to monitor his health, but had ended up monitoring the end of his marriage. Each item carried the weight of what had been lost. The smartwatch had become an unlikely companion throughout this ordeal. Initially a tool for health monitoring, it had evolved into a detective assistant, gathering evidence of Amanda's affair. Then it had become a confidant of sorts, documenting Robert's emotional and physical responses to the betrayal. Now, as Robert prepared to leave, it would transition once again into a tool for rebuilding his health and well-being. On his last night in their home, Robert sat in the guest room where he had slept since discovering the affair. He looked at his smartwatch, reviewing the data from the past months, a digital record of his journey from ignorance to knowledge, from confusion to clarity, from marriage to divorce. The device showed the progression clearly. The initial anomalies in sleep data, the elevated stress responses as he gathered evidence, the physiological impact of the confrontation, and finally, the gradual stabilization as he moved toward acceptance and the decision to start anew. As Robert removed the smartwatch from his wrist for the last time in their home, he felt a strange sense of gratitude. This piece of technology had caused him immense pain by revealing the truth, but it had also given him the clarity he needed to move forward. The smartwatch had tracked the end of his marriage, but it would also track the beginning of his new life. 6 months after moving out of their shared home, Robert sat in his new apartment, scrolling through the smartwatch data on his phone. The contrast between the current readings and those from 6 months ago was striking. Where once the device had recorded erratic sleep patterns, elevated heart rates, and constant stress indicators, it now documented the gradual return to normalcy. Robert's new life had taken shape slowly, then all at once. The initial weeks after the separation had been challenging, marked by loneliness and disorientation. His smartwatch recorded poor sleep quality, irregular eating patterns, and elevated stress levels during this adjustment period. The device that had revealed Amanda's affair now became a tool for monitoring his own recovery. The divorce had been finalized 2 months after Robert moved out. The proceedings were amicable, with both parties agreeing to a fair division of assets. Amanda had made no attempt to contest the separation, perhaps recognizing that her actions had made reconciliation impossible. They had spoken only a few times since the separation, each conversation brief and transactional. Robert's professional life had gradually returned to normal. After taking a brief leave of absence following the separation, he had returned to his IT position with renewed focus. His colleagues noticed the change in him. The tension that had characterized his final months of marriage had been replaced by a quiet determination. The smartwatch data reflected this transformation, showing improved sleep quality and more stable stress responses during work hours. The apartment Robert had chosen was a deliberate departure from the life he had shared with Amanda. Where their home had been spacious and filled with shared memories, his new space was compact and minimalist. Each item he purchased was chosen with care, representing not just functionality, but a new beginning. The smartwatch had helped him select the apartment, recording his physiological responses as he toured different options until he found the one that felt right. One of the most significant changes in Robert's life was a shift away from night shifts. After years of working while the world slept, he had transitioned to a daytime schedule. The change had been challenging at first, but the smartwatch data showed the positive impact on his health almost immediately. His circadian rhythms normalized, his sleep quality improved, and his overall stress levels decreased significantly. Robert had also started therapy, recognizing that the emotional trauma of Amanda's betrayal required professional guidance to process. His smartwatch became a useful tool in these sessions, providing concrete data about his physical responses to various triggers and stressors. The therapist noted how Robert's ability to track his physiological responses helped him develop greater emotional awareness and regulation. The social aspect of rebuilding his life proved more challenging than the professional or physical aspects. Robert had lost not just a wife, but also the social network they had built together. Many mutual friends had drifted away, uncertain how to navigate the division of loyalties that followed the divorce. His smartwatch recorded elevated stress levels during social interactions initially, but these gradually decreased as he built new connections. Robert had reconnected with old friends and made new ones through activities he enjoyed: hiking, photography, and coding workshops. He even joined a support group for people dealing with infidelity, finding comfort in shared experiences and the gradual process of healing. The smartwatch data showed improved well-being on days when he engaged in social activities, reinforcing the importance of connection in his recovery. Perhaps the most surprising development was Robert's perspective on technology in his life. The smartwatch that had revealed Amanda's affair had initially felt like a curse, a device that had brought pain by revealing an unwanted truth. Over time, however, Robert came to see it as a blessing in disguise. Without the data it provided, he might have continued in ignorance for months or even years, living a lie without his knowledge. Robert had become interested in the intersection of technology and emotional well-being, exploring how devices like smartwatches could be used not just to track physical health, but also to monitor and improve mental health. He started a blog documenting his journey, sharing how the smartwatch had helped him through the most difficult period of his life, and how he was now using it to build a healthier future. The blog gained a modest following, with readers sharing their own stories of how technology had impacted their relationships and well-being. Robert found purpose in helping others navigate similar challenges, transforming his painful experience into something that could benefit others. His smartwatch recorded positive physiological responses when he worked on the blog, reinforcing the healing power of finding meaning in suffering. As Robert reviewed his smartwatch data from the past 6 months, he noticed a pattern that brought a smile to his face. The device showed a gradual but consistent improvement in all health metrics: sleep quality, heart rate variability, stress levels, and physical activity. Where once the data had told a story of betrayal and heartbreak, it now documented resilience and recovery. Robert thought about Amanda occasionally, wondering how she was doing. The smartwatch had been his constant companion through the discovery of her affair, the confrontation, and the aftermath of their separation. Now, as he prepared to reset the device and start fresh, he felt a sense of closure rather than bitterness. The smartwatch that had tracked the end of his marriage would now track the beginning of his new life. And as Robert looked toward the future, he did so with the knowledge that even the most painful revelations can lead to growth, that technology can be both a mirror reflecting our truths and a tool for building our recovery, and that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another.